Caitlin Clark, who is only 22 years old, has already completely changed the women's basketball scene.
First in the league in fast break points.
Clark connects on a deep three.
She broke many records throughout her time in college, becoming the all-time top scorer in both men's and women's basketball.
For history, the all-time leading scorer.
In a time when many basketball fans are disinterested in women's basketball, Caitlin Clark is packing stadiums and garnering admirers who travel long distances to watch her play. It's hardly hyperbole to state that she's the most iconic person in WNBA history. Anyone who watches her in action will quickly realize why.
Wheeler finds Clark from the logo.
Diana Taurasi has been making an effort to take the focus away from Caitlin Clark and place it on herself. The most heartbreaking aspect of this scenario is that Diana Taurasi was, in fact, one of Caitlin Clark's childhood idols.
She was probably one of the first women's basketball players I really grew up idolizing.
Taurasi never once contacted out to provide words of support or guidance on how to achieve in the league that Clark had always dreamed of being a part of since she was a child, after Clark was drafted into the WNBA as the unanimous #1 overall pick. Conversely, Taurasi made an appearance on live television and essentially minimized Clark's skills. Diana was going to see the greatest event in women's basketball history as these two were finally scheduled to meet on June 30th, 2024. Phoenix saw a scorching June 30th, with highs reaching 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite the scorching heat, the local weather service advised locals to prepare for the intense heat. 177,000 spectators arrived at the Footprint Center, lured by the prospect of witnessing a celebrity.
Yeah, when I was sitting down in my seat all the way down there, I looked in every single corner of the Footprint Center to just make sure that somebody was sitting in every single seat, and they are.
For Caitlin, despite having a 20-year career, this was possibly the most important WNBA game she had ever been a part of. She was excited to meet her fans and sign autographs for everyone who came to watch her perform for Diana Taurasi. But it was just another day at the office. She was seeing things that had never been seen before in her WNBA career, including front row tickets going for $2,000 apiece.
Courtsides were going for as high as $2,000 for the front row for this game.
To clarify, in any case, courtside tickets for the Minnesota Lynx, the best club in the Western Conference and among the most well-liked in the WNBA, usually cost around $257. As she introduced herself to the one and only, DT saw the gravity of this game and realized that history was being written in real time. To begin the match, Diana was ecstatic to be in total charge and to be able to obtain everything she wanted, whenever she wanted. She was not only effortlessly scoring points, but she was also dishing out assists. By assists, I mean just throwing the ball to the 6'9" Brittney Griner, who towered over everyone on the court like a figure from Attack on Titan. Just to add a little aside, I watched Brittney Griner play in her first ever full-length WNBA game. Her claim that she could compete with DeMarcus Cousins, particularly considering that Cousins was at the height of his career prior to the injury, struck me as absurd. Just to add a little aside, I watched Brittney Griner play in her first ever full-length WNBA game. Her claim that she could compete with DeMarcus Cousins, particularly considering that Cousins was at the height of his career prior to the injury, struck me as absurd. I just wanted to put out there that my initial thought after watching BG play a full game was that her assertion was completely absurd. However, as I watched more of the game, it became evident that there's really no comparison at all. She would have eaten her like breakfast. Anyway, going back to her teammate Diana Taurasi, who I previously stated, she got off to a strong start but eventually felt pressured and fully grasped the magnitude of the Caitlin Clark hype. Soon after, Caitlin left everyone in shock by breaking her teammates' ankles completely, which must have shocked DT even more.
Rebecca Allen. Clark, she dropped Allen like
The first thing that came to mind when I saw that was, what if that had been Diana? What if the shot had gone? Following the Mercury's rapid ignition, Caitlin's fever started to spike again.
quickly up court. Boston running the floor for the layup, and here come the fever.
Taurasi tried her best to react to Caitlin's play at the end of the first quarter, but it didn't work out the way she had hoped. By this time in the game, Taurasi was starting to feel the heat. It was already above 110 degrees F outside, but we all know why it was even hotter inside. Anyway, Caitlin started to get hot, and the more she did, the more I found myself wondering why this daring statement was made by a WNBA player.
Who plays the style that how?
What
Caitlin
is the
plays?
style? Just threes?
Wow. It's
What
not
is
just
her,
threes.
What is
though.
her style?
Returning to DT, she played a respectable game overall, but I was somewhat disappointed in her performance for the following reasons. Even though she is the WNBA's unofficial GOAT, from what I saw, she only challenged Caitlin once. And that was during a pick and roll where it appeared like Caitlin made a clean steal, but the referee called a foul. Honestly, even after watching that play through multiple times, I still didn't see a foul, so I felt like the officials were unfairly singled out to get at least one more time. Speaking of the refs targeting Caitlin earlier in the game, they called this an offensive foul on her, which was obviously ridiculous.
I don't see how that's an offensive foul to me. That is a defensive foul.
I didn't get that one either.
Fans of the WNBA continued to criticize referees for their controversial calls against Caitlin. Another reason I was disappointed in Rasa was that, despite her passive-aggressive remarks about Caitlin, she didn't want any of the smoke and avoided her as much as possible. Time and time again, she had the chance to stand up for Caitlin, but declined to take this play, for example. Every time she faced up against Caitlin, she passed over the defensive assignment to her teammate rather than taking on the responsibility of guarding the player she said would struggle against mature women. Now, I understand that her teammate is a better defender, but come on, if you're the GOAT, you have to act like it. Even when Kobe was in his prime and Michael Jordan was with the Wizards, Jordan never shied away from standing up for him. Maybe she didn't want to embarrass herself or go through the same fate as her teammate who had a broken ankle. Or maybe the pressure of 177,000 fans in the stands was too much for her to handle. Then, on the very next play, Caitlin tricked her into a steal and then expertly assisted her teammate, whom Taurasi had previously stated wouldn't translate in the game. She was being made to look like barbecue chicken by Caitlin. Diana's worst nightmare was realizing that, despite her best efforts to belittle the girl, she was outplayed on national television, making circumstances worse for her. Diana essentially held the game in her hands. At one point in the second half, the Phoenix Mercury led by 15 points, but Caitlin led the charge in the comeback. Caitlin Clark initiating a resurgence.
Caitlin Clark catalyzing a comeback here for the Fever.
Escalating the harm Diana was a major factor in her team's one-play loss. For instance, she let a three-pointer slip away and took too long to recover, which resulted in a flagrant foul call. Indiana then had possession of the ball and 2 free throws as the game came to an end. On the other end of the court, Diana had the opportunity to increase her team's lead, but she was only able to make one of her 2 free throw attempts. Caitlin, on the other hand, calmly sank both of her attempts. Diana stopped smiling at that point, but even though a lot of things must have been going through her head, one can't help but wonder whether she felt bad about the words she had chosen.
Hey, I'm taking page. Next question.
In front of 177,000 spectators and maybe millions more watching on television, Diana, who had minimized Clark, was now losing to a squad that had not defeated a winning team all season. To make matters worse, the Fever's first victory came against Diana. After the game, DT was being humbled despite having spoken her spiel, and finally had some positive things to say about Caitlin.
What Caitlin's been able to do in her short career so far has just been nothing short of remarkable.
In any case, the entire WNBA assaulting Clark ire drama, in which Diana played a big part, was nothing more than a farce.